Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Jenny Whichello. Jenny, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Today, we're talking money mindset and wealth consciousness, which I'm stoked for. But for those that are new to you, please give a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I live in Northern Virginia, moved down here after spending about 10 years in New York City, where I was a CFO for a number of startups. I've now made a pivot. I'm no longer a CFO, but I work to coach and educate women on wealth building and transforming their money mindsets.
And money's a big one I love talking about. Number one, I think it's tangible when we're on the topic of mindset and manifesting. But I believe a lot of these principles we'll talk about today can go hand in hand with wanting to create relationships or business success or health. It's all the same, linear idea. But can you give a little bit more background on you worked CFO making six figures, but still were just getting by? So I'd love to know more about your background, your former
Yeah.
money mindset, and what led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure thing. So you're right. So I moved up to New York City after I got my MBA. I already had another business degree in accounting. And I was very lucky at the age of 26. I landed a VP role at a fashion startup. I was in charge of finance and operations, and I was making six figures. And that was the start of a lengthy career. I spent about 16 years as a CFO for a number of companies, all in the fashion industry. But even early on, when I was making six figures at the age of 26, I was always really good at my job. I could build really complex financial models. I could manage detailed cash flow forecasts. I could build departmental budgets and have an accuracy rate of 1%. And, so from 9 to 5, I'm doing this amazing job at work, managing corporate finances. And then I'm going home with this, hefty paycheck for a 26-year-old. And I'm struggling to manage my own finances. I would rack up credit card debt, pay it down, then rack it up even higher. I'd overdraft my bank account. I'd spend mindlessly. I'd get really motivated to start saving, and I'd set up all these transfers from from my checking account into various savings vehicles, and then I would turn them off after a couple months. And it felt like I was stuck in a cycle. And I thought, well, how can this be? I'm highly analytical. I've always been really good at math. Isn't that what's required here? And so I thought, well, there must be something different about personal finance than corporate finance that I just don't know. So I spent a lot of time reading a lot of books on personal finance, and that didn't help at all. And it took a really long time for me to get to the root cause of my struggles. Ultimately, what caused me to have this awakening is I became aware that we have a subconscious mind. And I dove deep into understanding that. I read Eckhart Tolle, I read Wayne Dyer, I read Deepak Chopra. I read all the books I could get my hands on. And I realized that we are often not in the driver's seat of our decisions. That holds true for a lot of our aspects of our lives, but even money. And I realized that I had subconscious beliefs that weren't in alignment with the life that I actually was living. So the biggest belief was that money, you have to work really hard to get it. And then it's just enough to get by. So here I am making six figures, which is more than what I needed to get by. But because I had a set point of just get by, just have enough money to pay my bills and put food on the table, et cetera, that anything beyond that, I had to get rid of. I had no concept that I could build wealth and save. And when you uncover these subconscious beliefs, it's important to understand the root of them. Like, where did they come from? What's the origin? And the origin of a lot of my beliefs came from my parents, as it does for most people. And what I saw very young, early on in my life, was that my parents, they both grew up very poor in Alabama. Money was a constant struggle and stress for them. There was never enough. And that was my core belief around what money is and how my relationship with money should be. And so once I had that awareness, then I knew what I needed to actually focus on to change my trajectory.
All right. So you just touched on so many things, and I've written down some highlights. I really want to break this down for individuals because what you're sharing, anybody can implement and apply to your life. But I love that you kept externally looking, right? And that's what we're taught to do. Well, I just need another book. I need another course. I need more
Mm-hmm.
education, only to find out. Let's talk about, and this is something I share often, but the idea of our subconscious mind. And until you understand, I like to think of a visual that's coming to mind is an iceberg.
Yep.
So sub meaning below, most people don't understand that 95% of who we are, our beliefs, our conditioning and programming, 95% is below our awareness. And so, like, Dr. Bruce Lipton says, if you want to understand your subconscious programming, look at your current reality. Your reality is an
Yep.
output of, so just like you, just getting by making six figures and still not enough. So can you explain like the quote work you did to become aware of, and then what I say, pull the weeds, plant new seeds. So you had to become aware of the beliefs and what you learned from mom and dad. Then how did you flip the script?
Yeah. So the process for me was pretty intense, and it took a while because I was doing it on my own, and really reading a lot of books and listening to podcasts and taking a lot of those learnings and then applying them to my own life. I did not have a coach to help me in this process. So it took me about 6 months, and I was getting up at about 5:30 every single day and spending an hour meditating, which is a lot of time to meditate if you've tried to meditate before. I was
Yeah.
spending an hour meditating because I had realized that I had a lot of mindless chatter. My head was just full
Mm,
of thoughts constantly, day in, day out. And I needed to practice quieting those thoughts so that I could tap into my subconscious at a deeper level. So I would meditate for about an hour, and then I'd do about an hour of self-reflection. So that could be, that would be either like journaling or reading some prompts and then seeing what bubbled up to the surface for me. So a good prompt would be, when I think about being wealthy, my mind goes to what, and I would see what would come up for me. And then I would, what I like to say, I was doing this like, I was being an archaeologist. I was, scraping my mind to figure out what crumbs were there. And then I would put on the investigator hat. And when I would surface something, I would explore it. I'd be curious about it. Well, where
mm,
did that belief come from? Like, what has that belief um, cost me? It's a lot of our beliefs that aren't helpful. They're costing us opportunities. We shy away from taking opportunities or taking action to better our situation. In what ways have I benefited from this belief? Right? It's kept me safe. It's kept me small. I haven't taken a lot of risks. I haven't felt out of my comfort zone. And then finally, what do I know for sure? Like what is actually the truth here? If I put on my logical hat and I look at this belief that I've been walking around for 20 something years with, like, what's really true about it? Is it really true that um that at best you're only going to get by in life? No, because I can look around me and see lots of people that are living very fulfilling lives with financial abundance, right? And so going through that process, it took me a while, but it was essential. And once you recognize the truth of your beliefs, when they creep up, when you're going somewhere and you're about to make a financial decision or you're about to make a financial purchase, and those thoughts creep up in your mind, you start to disconnect from them. They aren't part of me anymore. They're just mental chatter, and I see them for what they are. They're just
yeah.
they're just baloney, nonsense beliefs that are cropping up to try to keep me small. All of this is tied to um, your subconscious mind operating from the vantage point of its job being to keep you safe, right? So even when it comes down to something like investing money, your subconscious mind might bubble up a lot of concerns about the stock market, and you're going to lose all your money, and what if this happens, what if that happens? That's all in an effort to try to keep you safe, but it's not in our best interest because the world around us has evolved, but in a lot of ways our subconscious mind hasn't, and so it still thinks that we're living in caveman days where we need to be incredibly cautious about what we do in life. So going through that process of self-reflection, and then this was key for me, and this is part of my coaching program, and it's part of my financial planning process that's unique. uh, Before I set any financial goals, before I decided I'm going to get out of debt or I'm going to start saving more money, I got clear on the vision for my life. what is it that I really want my experience here on earth to be? What do I want to be doing with my time? Who do I want to be with? How do I want to feel? And not just, right now, but 10 years from now, at the height of my career, at retirement, at the end of my life, when I'm on my deathbed, what am I going to be most grateful for? And I got really clear on that first. And then I explored how money was going to play a role in helping me to make that my reality. And then from there, I made my financial goals.
So a lot of that, well, obviously it's all the awareness, but it's also that mindset shift. And I think that's even something I've worked on that, okay, when I'm to get to that quote next level or have more income, then I can employ people and have more impact and reach more people. And so I'm like finding all the benefits and the good that I can do. One of my things I wrote down earlier this year is I don't care what the bill is, if it's like a $20 tab, a $40 tab. I want to be in the habit of dropping $100 tips. That's just something that makes me feel good and excites me. And so I think it's finding those little things, how to give back, like that's sort of anonymously, but not, you know what I mean? But I know $100 bill on a server would probably make their day. So I want to ask you,
absolutely.
in the 6 months, you're doing all the research, you're analyzing, you're being logical and all the things. How did you, as I said, pull the weeds, plant new seeds? So become aware of all the subconscious programming you learned from mom and dad. And what was your process, or what are you still doing to change the script?
Yeah. So even to today, I practice affirmations and visualization almost daily. The affirmations I do daily. The visualization I don't do every single day. But once I got clear on my vision, I explored how I need to operate to be the person that has that life, right? So sometimes it's easy to talk about this in terms of weight, because weight and money are the same thing, essentially. We have a relationship with food, we have a relationship with money, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be a healthy person, you cannot walk around thinking, I'm an unhealthy person. I'm overweight, I don't like working out, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to be a wealthy person, you cannot walk around thinking, I'm broke as can be, I'll never make money, I can't pay my bills, et cetera. So once I got clear on the vision of what I wanted my life to be, I created intention statements and affirmations that were in alignment with who I needed to be and how I needed to operate to be that person. And then I created a visualization process for myself. So there's a wide variety of how you can go about doing this. The simplest is to think about your ideal day and to think about it all the time. To envision, what is it like to wake up and live that life? How does it feel? I think feeling is probably the most important component here.
Yeah.
If you cannot feel wholeheartedly in every cell of your body what it is going to feel like to be out of debt, to have a better job, to build wealth, to have that house for your family that you've dreamed of, if you cannot feel and get emotional about what that will be like for you, you're going to have a hard time building a sustaining momentum to achieve it. And you'll certainly have a hard time manifesting it.
Some emotions that are coming to mind for me, like when I practice this stuff, is feeling, well, obviously gratitude's the number one. So grateful that it already happened, that it already is, right? But can we explain the fine line of this is not fake it till you make it? I talk more about it's embodying it until you become it. But I would love to hear for you, what are those emotions? Was it joy, gratitude, empowerment, abundant? Like what were you feeling time and time again to actually bring those experiences to you?
Yeah, for me, it was peace of mind. And so I talk about that a lot. I had stress about money when I had money. I had stress about money when I didn't have money. I had stress about money when I thought I knew what I was doing with it and when I didn't know what I was doing with it, right? And I never had just a sense of calm. Like I could make financial decisions in a carefree manner and not feel reckless. I could spend lavishly on things and not feel guilty about it afterwards. There's two components of that. There's the feeling piece of this and having that peace of mind, but then there's having an actual plan externally that allows you to live that way, right? So, but the external plan is what most people default to as the solution. They overlook, or they're not even aware that it all starts inside first, right? So embodying that feeling of having peace of mind around money, being confident in my decisions, knowing that, faith was a big component for me. And a lot of people have a hard time thinking about faith in terms of money, but I had a faith and I started to foster a core belief that I will always be taken care of. Like everything is always going to work out for me. If I lose my job, that's going to end up being a great thing for me. If I make a financial mistake or a bad decision, that's going to be an amazing learning experience for me. Everything is purposeful, and cultivating that faith that whatever comes at me or whatever I create for myself is by design. And so there can be nothing wrong with what happens from here on out. And that's hard. That's really hard to cultivate when you're struggling financially. It's very challenging, but that was essential for me, was leaning into that faith.
What I wanted to ask there is, especially if somebody's in debt right now or just getting by, and the clients that you work with, can we talk about, one, this inner work that we're talking about? Because as within, so without. I love the idea that life is a mirror. So what we're trying to teach people is how to raise your wealth consciousness, right? How to live in a state of, even though if we're, quote, programmed, fear, lack, scarcity, not enough, and that's the world paradigm, right? Cultural paradigm. What are you doing with your clients so that they feel worthy? That, that you touched on it, you felt guilty spending money.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I very much go through the process that I went through for myself, right? So, I blend financial planning with the inner work of money, and I toggle between the two. So the first part of any change process, whether it's financial change you want to see, physical change with your well-being, etc., change in your relationships, the first step is always awareness. You cannot experience any sort of transformation in your life if you're not thoroughly aware of the issue at hand and where it came from.
Yeah.
And so the first part of the process is to pull back the rug and look at what are the beliefs in my client's subconscious, like giving them a series of prompts and helping coach them through that process of uncovering what those beliefs are that they've been walking around with, most of which they have been unaware of. And then understanding the behaviors and habits that have been born from those beliefs. So we don't just walk around with a bunch of beliefs in our head. They build neural pathways in our brain and drive us to take habitual action. And so that habitual action around money could be just avoiding money altogether, right? If you have a belief that money is difficult or you're not good with it, maybe that's driven you to just avoid it altogether. So understanding the linkage between those beliefs and the habits. And then here's the third part, and this is really important. Understanding where your current financial results are, like what your current financial state is, and how those behaviors and habits and beliefs brought you to that place. So we do that connecting the dots exercise, because a lot of people, when they look at their finances, they often default to wanting to convince themselves that their current financial state is the result of some external conditions or somebody that's caused this to happen to them.
Right.
And if you're operating from that place, you don't have any agency to change your trajectory. You're going to stay stuck. You've got to understand how you created those results through your habits, which were driven by your beliefs. And so that's an essential part of this process. It's the first phase of my coaching program. And then the next phase, because I don't believe in dwelling on that stuff. I believe pull back the rug, see what's there, and then put the rug back down and let's move on.
Yeah.
The longer we dwell on something, we're just strengthening those feelings and those emotions related to it, right? So then we move on to the second phase, which is all about getting clear on what you want out of your experience we call life. What do you want? Like, what do you really, really want that you can feel in your soul? Let's get clear on that. And then let's devise a financial plan to help you achieve it. And what's interesting is through that process, in the first phase of that process that I just described, people recognize that their beliefs are BS, that they're nonsense, and that they've wreaked a lot of havoc on their lives.
Yeah.
And then they get into phase two and they realize like what's possible for them through visualization and visioning. they realize what they really want, and they start to believe that it's possible for them. So then when we get to the tactical part of the process of actually building a financial plan, it's interesting because oftentimes when I'm working with clients who have just been getting by and they've been barely living within their means, they think, well, I can't save for a home. I can't start saving for retirement. I can't build wealth. I'm barely paying my electricity. When we move through that process and we actually get to that piece of the financial planning stage, they often see that the trade-offs they need to make are quite painless because they've gotten really clear on what they want and they know how they will feel when they get it. And so all of a sudden that trip they were making every weekend to Target doesn't mean anything to them anymore. And they can reallocate those funds towards the things that really do mean something to them.
Okay, so there's a few things you touched on there I'd like to break down a little bit. One that is really, really freaking important that you mentioned is, the idea of victim mentality, blaming our external circumstances, people, boss, government, whoever. And by doing the blame game, you take your power away. And so I think for some that's hard to grasp. And I think about it a little bit like having a little humble pie. But how can we highlight for individuals that it's actually taking your power back by taking 100% responsibility for your life? You actually take your power back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the most challenging parts of my job, because there are legitimate reasons why the women that I work with are struggling. Often they are lacking financial literacy because we don't invest in it in our country, right? Yeah. They're working jobs where they're not being paid appropriately, right? And so there are external conditions, but that's not the excuse for us to stay stuck in them. And so, when we acknowledge that there's external challenges we have to move past, the onus is on us to move past them, to advocate for ourselves in the ways that we need to. So I think the key there is, when people start to make better financial decisions, they immediately start to see results. Immediately. So when you start to transform your relationship with money, you start to be more mindful about how you handle money, the decisions that you make and how you spend it, et cetera. And you start to see the results immediately. The key there is to reward yourself. I do not believe in the advice that is doled out every single day that you should never spend money on your wants. You should only spend on your needs. If you have any credit card debt, you have no business going out to eat at a restaurant. I believe that an important part of conditioning yourself to understand that you're in the driver's seat is to reward yourself and to trick your subconscious mind to thinking, I did a good thing. Here's your reward, and do more of it.
Somebody, I forget, I had a previous podcast guest and I love how she said this. She does like micro upgrades. So I think something that's coming to mind for somebody who doesn't feel they have money or in debt and like just getting by, even if you treat yourself once a month to Starbucks, so that $5 or $6, that's, if you think that's treating yourself, then treat yourself, right? Or take yourself out for Chipotle. And I mean, now lunch is like $15 out, right? But treat yourself. And it doesn't, we're not talking hundreds or thousands of dollars, but those little things. I remember Jake Ducey, he's a really amazing YouTuber who talks a lot about subconscious and money. He was just getting by, and I think that they were in thousands of dollars of credit card debt. But what he worked himself up to with his now wife, they would go stay at a luxury hotel for one night, just one night, to feel the feelings of living in luxury and being surrounded by those kind of people. So how important is it who we're surrounding ourselves with and their own money baggage?
Yeah, absolutely. It's essential. You cannot transform your relationship with money and therefore your financial future if you're surrounded by a bunch of people that just regurgitate negative beliefs and want to keep you stuck in your old cycle, right? So now that doesn't mean we can divorce everybody in our lives that isn't in alignment with where we want to be going, right? But we can certainly make sure that we are equally infusing our daily lives with things that are more positive and more in alignment. So, whether that's every morning listening to a podcast like this one that reinforces your new beliefs, or listening to music that is uplifting for you, or reading inspiring books, having a meditation routine. There's a lot of different things that you can infuse into your life. Gratitude practice and gratitude journaling, that will help you disconnect from your environment as best you can. I even have this is unrelated to money, but I get stressed out about certain things in the news. So I have an app on my phone that blocks me from going to news sites, because I would be checking them out all day long and then getting stressed out about the news, right? We often have to put a little friction between ourselves and whatever it is that's going to keep us stuck.
Okay, the second point I want to touch on that I wrote down what you were sharing, just a few minutes ago, is the idea that I love the 80-20 rule, that any success in life is 80% mindset, 20% strategy, where I feel like most people flip that. I did that in business. I believe entrepreneurship is personal development on steroids, but I went all in, spending thousands of dollars on a website and copy and strategy and doing all the things. But just like people are seeking all these external financial planning. But if you don't have a belief system, the mindset of feeling wealthy, abundant, free, none of that strategy matters. That's why I want to highlight, I believe in the 80-20 rule. I'm even at the point like 90-10. But, you mentioned that. So what are you doing, like daily rituals, to keep you in this space?
Yeah. So, for me, I look at my financial goals every single day. Even if even if my progress towards them hasn't changed from yesterday to today, I still look at them, because I want to reinforce to myself what I'm working towards. We all live busy lives. It's easy to get wrapped up in whatever thing that we think is important in the moment, which usually isn't, right? So reminding yourself of what your goals are, reminding yourself of what your vision is, if you've done visioning before, tapping into the feelings. Again, like, it's not enough. I get a little bit frustrated sometimes when people are out there creating vision boards. Everybody's created one, right? They end up being a really pretty piece of artwork on your wall because you don't tap into the emotions. You've just cut out a bunch of nice things you'd like to have and stuck them on a board. You haven't actually tapped into the emotions of what it would feel like to have that cashmere coat, or whatever it is, or take that vacation to Bali. So tapping into the emotions, if you can do it on a daily basis, that's ideal. And then I also do sleep hypnosis. So I take advantage of, I'm a deep sleeper, so I don't wake up easily from noises. And I take advantage of that. And so I will spend 8 hours while I'm snoozing overnight, listening to either a track of affirmations or listening to something empowering. I've listened to books. I've listened to like every Wayne Dyer book while I've been asleep, because your subconscious mind doesn't go to sleep. It stays wide awake. So why not use that to your advantage and train it while you're snoozing?
Yeah. Well, and what I want to touch on there, I've learned through Dr. Joe Dispenza and the power of meditation. There are two prime opportunities every single day. First thing in the morning when we're waking up, coming from those delta waves into theta. So theta is the target, right? Theta is when we can get past the analytical mind, using the conscious mind 5% to impress to our subconscious, I am wealthy. But if you're saying these things and you don't feel them, then the subconscious goes, well, that's BS. Right? That's not true. You're not abundant. You're in debt. What would you recommend to people that are like, okay, this all sounds good and I can start writing affirmations, but the resistance piece?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I ask my clients to write about is what ultimately gives you fulfillment. Like, when are you in your flow? What are you doing when you look at the clock and you realize that the time just flew by? Yeah. Like, what are those experiences that you're having? And we all have them, time. All have those moments when time goes by incredibly slow and we're doing something we don't want to be doing. And time flies by because we're lost in everything that we're doing. We're loving it and we're so fulfilled. Let's get clear on what those times are and how can you infuse more of that into your life, and then practice gratitude for those moments. Right. So the more you can spend your life doing things that give you fulfillment, and this does not have to be something that costs a lot of money, or it doesn't mean that you have to go quit your job and then you just do yoga all day long, right? But it could mean that, like, hey, I felt really great when I gave a bunch of clothes I no longer wear anymore away to charity. Like, I feel really great about that. So how can you do more of that? How can you make a commitment to yourself that every time you buy something for yourself, you're going to give something away, and be grateful that you have that privilege of giving something away? So for everybody, it's unique, but I think finding those things, those little moments or actions where you can say, I felt whole, I felt fulfilled, I felt grateful, I felt incredibly blessed. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with money. Like for me, one of those moments is when my son was born. I had a C-section, and when they laid him on my chest for the first time and I looked in his eyes, like, that is the most grateful I've ever felt in my whole life. And so I tap into that feeling anytime when I'm starting to worry about something or get stressed, or I'm on a plane and it's turbulent, I tap into that feeling.
Well, what I really hear from you is you are living mindfully and intentionally. And I think that's getting out of autopilot, living consciously. Here's what I wrote down that I'd love to hear from you so that people understand that this is tangible and this is possible for you, right? We're providing evidence of what's possible for anyone. Can you share a couple client wins, like kind of their before and after, when they were where they were doing
Yeah.
the work and the awareness piece and these daily rituals, where they're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. So one client that I worked with this year, so at the start of the year, she came to me, she said, I'm drowning in debt. My debt is, I'm carrying it around like it's such a burden on me. I actually have a Post-it note on my computer with the number, with my credit card balances on it. My family has outgrown our home. We're literally on top of each other. We need a bigger home, but I can never, I can't even envision buying a bigger home because of all this debt that I have. So here's the funny thing about our minds when it comes to our finances. Often we are just wrong about them, right? And this happens so often with my clients. They'll tell me one story, and then when we actually look at their financial situation holistically, we find that that's not the truth at all. So for this particular person, she had about, I want to say $10,000 or $12,000 worth of credit card debt. She had over $300,000 of equity in her home. And so, but she wasn't even aware of that. And that wasn't the focus of how can I leverage this equity to get what I really want, which is a bigger home for my family. Her focus was on the $10,000, which was actually meaningless in comparison to her whole net worth.
Yeah.
And so, obviously we worked on a plan together, and that plan involved her leveraging that equity to buy a piece of land to then build a custom home. And once she sells her home that she's in now, she will take a portion of those proceeds and pay off the credit cards. And so, fast forward, after 6 months, she was working with the architect. She'd already bought the property. She was working with the architect to build the house, right? And so all of a sudden, her obsession with the credit card debt went away, and she was focused on what she really wanted, and then focused on how she's going to make that happen, right? Yeah. So that's an example. Another example I had was a client who was not living within her means in any way, shape, or form, was spending probably around $2,000 to $3,000 a month more than what she was bringing in, and all of that excess was going on a credit card. So she was just maxing out credit cards left and right, and then trying to go open more and putting more money on those. And when we got clear on what it was that she actually wanted money to do for her, the majority of her spending was not in alignment with that. So she wanted to travel. She wanted to invest in yoga. She wanted to do things with her dog. Like, there were a lot of things that were meaningful to her. And then when we looked at where her money was going, like 90% of it wasn't going to any of those things. And so that's where, we were talking about earlier, awareness is essential here, right? So we can spend mindlessly day in and day out and never realize that we're literally throwing away our best life by spending money on things that don't matter to us. So clarity is important there, and then devising a plan for not just how to trim her spending and how to be more mindful in her spending decisions, but how to reallocate that cash to what she really wants. If you don't do the second part of that process, and this is what's problematic sometimes with budgeting, I'm not a fan of budgeting, and I don't do it with my clients, is it's all about cutting. Let's get you down to living within your means. Well, then what? then what do I do? The second part of the process is always to be clear on your vision and then to build a financial plan that takes your financial resources and allocates it to the things that really matter.
From those two stories you shared, kind of my takeaways. The first one, it was changing the focus. So she was so focused on debt, debt, debt. So of course, whatever you focus on, wherever focus goes, energy flows. So you're going to get more debt. You changed, all she did was a shift in perspective to look at all the abundance in her life.
Exactly.
Then you can have a plan. The second one, it was looking at our habits.
Mm-hmm.
And again, those because habits become habitual and we live in autopilot, you might not even be paying attention of the self-sabotaging things we do, right?
Exactly. You are literally on autopilot. If 95% of your decisions are not being made from your conscious state, right? You're just kind of navigating through life with somebody else in the driver's seat. Joe Dispenza says, we have an operating system and we wake up and it's rinse and repeat every single day until we become aware of it and we make a conscious decision to change, and then we take action towards changing, right? But another great line of his is your familiar past becomes your predictable future. And oftentimes clients, one of the hurdles I have to get past with folks when it comes to transforming their mindset is they will argue for all of their limitations and argue for why they're doing the things that they are today, even if they know that the result is not in their best interest. They will fight tooth and nail to keep it, because that staying in that comfort zone, even if the future is predictably bad, just because it's predictable feels more safe to them. And changing things around and starting to adopt new rituals around money feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar, it feels scary sometimes.
Well, and this whole thing that I feel like I want to shout from the rooftops is getting out of your own way. And I think the message we're really sharing with individuals, it doesn't matter your current financial situation. What book is it by? It's Our Birthright to Be Rich.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the name of that author, but that's something Bob Proctor always preached on. I think he either read the book or wrote a book. Anyway, you have a right to be rich, wealthy, whatever that means for you.
Absolutely. I do not believe that we were put here on earth to struggle.
No.
I don't believe we were put here to eat rice and beans when there's beautiful, amazing food in the world, right? And especially here in the United States and in the year 2023, it's never been easier for someone to become a millionaire. We've never lived in a time where we've had as many resources, books, experts, tools, technology that can support us on that journey. And so if we're not on the path to getting there, that's of our own choosing.
Right. At this point, ignorance is a choice.
Yeah.
All right. So here's what I want to ask you. You've shared a lot of golden nuggets. What do you believe is one key takeaway you want listeners to get?
I want listeners to know that you can build generational wealth. You do not have to be born rich. You do not have to have an inheritance. You do not have to have a six-figure job. That shocks a lot of people. You do not have to have a fancy college degree. What you have to have is a core belief that you're worthy and capable of it, and then a path to make it reality.
Yes. All right. I'd love to wrap up the interview, so I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
What is a quote or mantra that you live by?
Ooh, I have so many. I have so many. I guess I'll go back to the one that I use the most, which is I've already quoted on this show. That shows you how much I use it, which is you'll see it when you believe it. Wayne Dyer. We're often, and I struggle with clients with this, well, I'll believe that when my bank account looks differently. It's not going to work that way. It's the other way around.
Yes. What is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
Not related to money or mindset. I just finished Maria Bamford's new book called Yes, I'll Join Your Cult, which is very much about all the 12-step programs that she's joined. She's my favorite comedian. So if you're not into hearing about someone's struggles with mental illness and things like that, it's probably not a book for you. But if you love her comedy, I highly recommend it.
And is there one specifically maybe around the that helped you on your financial journey that
Yeah.
you would recommend?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is not a finance book, but I always recommend it as my best book for people looking to improve their relationship with money. And that's The Power of Now. Well, actually, there's two: The Power of Now and A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Those books changed my life because they opened my eyes up to the fact that I have a bunch of beliefs, but they are not me. They are
Yeah.
separate from me.
Yes. For me, Eckhart, he's well, to watch him speak, he's so damn monotone. But what is the biggest takeaway from those books? Just simply you are not your thoughts?
He especially in A New Earth, the pain body.
Mm,
And this concept that we're living in the past and we're repeating past challenges or past experiences we've had that weren't pleasant, and that is embodied in our body and who we are.
yeah.
That was really eye-opening for me because of my family. I didn't have a traumatic childhood, but my parents certainly did, and their parents did as well. And I could then see how that had embodied itself in me, even though I didn't have those experiences directly.
Mm. Final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, I would give my younger self the advice that not everything is about a tactical solution. Not everything is about something you've got to go do. You've got to go get. You've got to like learn. That the answers are often found within, not externally.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson it took me many years to learn.
100%. And such a great note to end on. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation.
Sure thing. It's lovely.